Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for the birth of this new book, baby, Ordinary Mysticism. Your Life a Sacred Ground. Yay! Comes out tomorrow. And I can't think of someone I would rather be by my side in a moment like this than my friend Caroline Myss, who has been the voice of the sacred in the ordinary in our world for decades. Such an eloquent voice for bringing it down to earth and grounding our spirituality in our real lives. Caroline, thank you.
Right behind me are all your books. I mean, I treasure your work. I treasure it. I think you are a genius. This is what I say about Mirabai when she's not around. So it's not like I'm flattering her. It is not. You know that. You know that I've sent you notes about that. I find your writing style to be absolutely, I mean, from the moment I opened this book, wait a minute, I opened the book. Where is that? Welcome to the temple of your regular life, the garden of your days, the harbor where you catch your breath, the theater of your relationships. Who thinks like that? This is the terrain where you wake up and transform. I mean, from the moment I opened this book, I knew you'd done it again.
Aww.
And then the examples you use, which are so perfect, ordinary life, discovering the extraordinary. Just well done, you. Well,
Thank you, Carolyn. That just feels like a literal blessing of this book into the world when you say that. And yes, you have written me notes like that for most of my books, and it means the world to me to hear because you've written so many books and you know the labor of a writer and that sort of dance that you do as a writer between using your own efforts and making yourself available for something to come through. And it's a sort of a co-creative process with the divine in a way. Don't you find when you write?
I do. And I want to say that and this is, I think it's difficult to find the words because we're in this in-between time. I think this is a most extraordinary time to be alive, Mirabai. I do. I think it's a privilege to be alive now, but I think people who have that multiple sensory system operating, like us, actually, we're tasked with articulating what the sacred world is like and creating ways to invite people to come into the sacred world that they're already in. It's impossible not to be in the sacred. It's impossible not to dwell in the breath of God because all creation is the divine. The choice is whether or not a person wants to one day open their eyes and realize this is a theater of God, and therefore all beings are beings of God. And of course, that's the most transformational thought a human being can have, which because the task then becomes, how do I live differently if all of this is holy?
Right.
And that's why I think a book like yours is exactly that. It says that mysticism, that mystery that God is in all things, is as ordinary as realizing, well, this desk was once a tree, which was once growing, which was once alive and couldn't have lived without the breath of God. So this too is that. And by the way, did you get the news about Teresa of Avila? They opened her coffin.
No.
And she was incorruptible.
Recently?
Yeah, last week.
How did I miss this?
How'd you miss that, girl? I'll send you some news about that. That's personal between us. We have a passionate love with this great Spanish mystic, saint, this holy woman. But yeah,
Wow.
go Teresa. But you know, we're crazy mystics, Mirabai and I. We really are. We see the world through this lens that everything is a reflection of the sacred. And it's like sometimes when I walk around, sometimes when I sit on my porch, I just break out into giggles and I think the divine is everywhere and in all things. And I have to struggle with when I'm on the earth, as it were, and looking at all the chaos on the earth. That is when, like in your book, like how many mystics. Now, what? No, it was Rumi. I was reading about Rumi this morning before I got to your book. I was reading, you know, how many mystics had profound experiences but couldn't deal with the sound of someone eating their food.
Right. Yes.
You know, and I think that mysticism is the capacity to recognize the ordinary and the extraordinary need each other. They're one and the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And the religions of the world have kind of conditioned us to think of spiritual as one thing and ordinary, everyday, uh, secular life as something else. And I think that this book is really just tapping into the zeitgeist, into the collective consciousness that knows better now, that will no longer buy into that rhetoric that the two are separate. And so we just need to it's just my turn in this particular book to say it my way, but I think we need affirmation of what already is rising in the consciousness of the collective, which is that everything is sacred and everything belongs.
And I think that the template that the universe has dropped in as a pulsating guide is that all is one. That all is one. And that is the new magnetic current in the way organic divinity works. It doesn't send out bulletins. It sends out these organic currents and all and like from the 60s on, people decided that I think health should be integrated. I think there's a body, mind, spirit makes more sense. I think the integration of this. So it's not like there's an integration happening, and as usual, the opponents of the sacred show up. The opponents, the shadow side is showing up. The shadow side that says, no, we can't become a planetary community. We can't become all as one. We can't become, because what about me? So it's bringing out the most selfish, narcissistic, as well as the greatest part of human potential. Both are true, Mirabai. Both
Yeah,
are.
it's our mutual friend Matthew Fox just wrote a book about the Antichrist that I think you wrote. Did you
Forward.
write?
I wrote the
You
forward.
wrote the forward, and I have it, and it's extraordinary and disturbing, and I don't, maybe because I didn't grow up Christian, and that paradigm is slightly to outside of my sphere of familiarity, but obviously not too much because I wrote all these translations of the Christian mystics. But so the whole idea of an antichrist is challenging for me, but the way Matthew frames it and the way you and Andrew Harvey bookend it in that important book about our times and this election really helps me to understand what you're saying, that there is this counter force to the rising of the understanding and experience of the sacred in the everyday, and it's delusional and naive to think otherwise.
Right. It really is. I mean, we have to look at, just as we are in this incredible time of real, I mean, we've had 70 years now of what we call the human potential or the spiritual awakening movement. 70 years.
Wow.
We should be much further down the line than we are.
Right.
And still, we are a species that celebrates weaponry.
Yeah.
It celebrates our potential, the way we can kill people. We think that's a great accomplishment. We think that's a great accomplishment. That it's not that, I mean, just the other day I was saying to someone, if people realized how powerful they were, if they understood their inner power, if they really got it, we would never again have to worry about lack or climate change or the inability to have enough for everyone, because we would think differently. Our creativity would be routed toward how do we unify to help nature. What does nature require of us? Not how do we take more, but what does nature require of us? What is required here? How do we share more? Instead of fearing, the human species is so filled with fear that it is its destructive element. And every single thing about mysticism is how beautiful the world is without fear. And what I think truly, I think that the near-death experience has become a type of modern day mystical experience.
Yeah, I've been following your work with that a little bit. Say more.
I really do. I think that people because what is fascinating to me is that it seems as though people are being selected to have near-death experiences, and and many have in common, many, Mirabai, is that they're atheists or agnostics.
Huh.
They have no inner, which is not, it's not uncommon to be an atheist these days or an agnostic. So many people I know grew up in a home without ever going to church, without any teachings. I mean, I went to mass every morning. I mean, that's what baby Catholics did in my era, right? And then we had all the sacraments, and I'm grateful for that. Oh my God, I'm so grateful for that. But people are untethered growing up. And like Nancy Rhines, and she has this near-death experience. She's an atheist scientist, and she finds herself, well, where am I? And how could this be? But when they come back, what's so fascinating is that they come back with this message: tell people how beautiful this is. Tell people that the life you're living on earth is simply a temporary, this is the real life. This is the life. And here's another thing that's fascinating. Nobody ever wants to come back. They're like, please don't send me back there. Please don't send me back there. It wouldn't be that way if people understood how powerful love was, how powerful compassion was. But as soon as, this idea that there's not enough, and I mean, look at what J.D. Vance just did. He just lied and admitted on CNN that he was lying about the Haitians, but it was good for politics. What kind of low life does that? I mean, Jesus said the lowest person is a liar. These people are demonic. They are creatures of the devil. I mean, they really are.
And so my hope, and I want to see if you share this, I think you do in your own way, is that if we can remind people of who they already are, mystics, that is, people who have access, direct access to the presence of the sacred, to the presence of love, if we can remind enough people, the 100th monkey syndrome, or some kind of critical mass of, really, so I actually don't have to earn my access to the divine, to intimacy with God. I already am that. If we can remind enough people through our books, through our teachings, through community connection.
I think the word I would use is inspire, not remind. I think people need to be inspired to consider a different relationship to power, to their power. Because I think we make the journey here on earth from our love of external power to discovering the power of love. And that's the journey we're all on. And that love of external power, that it's this kind of power, outside power, stuff, prestige, fame, money, that keeps me safe. And it's the love of that power that makes you negotiate your power. And that's how you become powerless. And when you realize, wait a minute, I think this stuff is meaningless, you have to be reminded of that. You have to really get it. You have to really, you evolve to that, where it's got to fail you. And if it fails you enough time,
Yeah.
it's got to fail you. You've got to lose. You've got to lose enough times to where you realize there's nothing I can buy that will heal this illness. There's nothing I can do that will make this person love me. There's nothing I have that can save me from aging. I think maybe there's a different kind of power I should invest in. Maybe it's a power that is transcendent of that kind of power.
Beautiful.
So it's not a reminding, it's really an inspiration that says, try something else. Try something higher. But the thing is how frightened people are of that.
Right.
They're terrified of it. And in your experience, why have people been so terrified of it?
Because I think our sense of who we are, our ego identification, our limiting views of who we are threatened to be dissolved and in the unitive experience. So, for instance, if I'm walking in these hills outside my window here, the Talpa foothills here in New Mexico, and I have a moment where I forget that I'm separate from all of creation, and I sort of blend. These are usually fleeting mystical moments, right? Into my environment, my breath, the bird song, the smell of pinon and sage. That's not threatening because it's just woven into the fabric of our lives as human beings. But there are other mystical experiences we can have that are much scarier, much more threatening, where we feel, and you've seen me go into altered states of consciousness, Caroline, and you know how scary it is, even for me, who's been on the path for 50 years since I was a young teenager. Those moments when our identity does dissolve into the one, and there's a natural fear that arises that we're not going to be able to function. We won't be able to come back and function in the world, that we won't care about feeding our children, or making enough money to pay the bills, or we won't be able to show up to work and be productive, that somehow we feel like the
We'll lose our
mystical,
grip.
yes,
We'll lose our grip.
that it's a kind of madness, and the mystics of all the spiritual traditions were mad in the sense of their minds were unhinged from ordinary everyday consciousness in some ways, and they were crazy with love for God, or passion for union, or longing. And so how do we function as mystics in this world, grounded, both feet right here, hearts open, minds open, and recognizing that it's not about love of power, it's the power of love, and still function in this fleeting incarnation? Because we have lost so many people, you and I, and so many of you listening. We know how brief our time here on earth is. How do we activate for love?
I'm just taking a note. You just inspired something, but I think one of the core fears of opening to that, the power of your inner mystical wiring, your multi-sensory self, is that your relationship to truth becomes heightened. And when that happens, it means you renegotiate your relationship to your shadow. Darkness. That's the great fear. In my experience, that's a person's greatest fear. They are terrified to not have access to the shadow. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Mirabai. They're terrified because truth means you have to deal with life and tell the truth.
Right.
You have to be truthful. You can't negotiate anymore. You can't tell yourself, you can't walk past a homeless person and say, oh, they should just get a job.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, you'll feel their suffering.
Right.
You feel differently. And you think, I'm walking past this person and it's up to me to give them even 50 cents or to give them a prayer. But you can't tell yourself things that are not true anymore. You can't tell yourself you're not connected to every single person.
Right.
And that certain things don't matter when they do matter.
That is beautiful. That's a perfect example of what is we're afraid of. If we truly recognize in every cell of our bodies that we are connected to all beings, to everything that is, we can't turn away from the face of suffering, for instance, anywhere that we might encounter it. It doesn't have to be a huge grand gesture, but there is a responsive reciprocity and belonging that
It's
is the truth.
it's the way we live. We can no longer say that the wars happening other places are not, I am not a participant in that, because all is one and all life breathes together. And therefore, when I am in conflict, I am feeding conflict. But every act of forgiveness I participate in is somehow, in ways I will never understand, adding to the grace of resolution.
So beautiful. And
You,
that's scary.
but it's demanding. It
Yeah.
means you really do have to live differently. You have to resolve everything with someone else differently. You have to treat people differently. It really, and people love their shadow. I had someone in a workshop in Ireland, and when I was talking about the power of forgiveness, and believe me, I struggle with this all I have to do is look at Trump, and I'm back being right on earth and full of rage and every ugly thing you can think. But I, this, when I was talking about the power of forgiveness, this man stood up and said, that's it, I can't hear anymore. I cannot stand, I can't do this anymore. He said, I need my anger. I need it to survive in my family. He said, he said, I know the power of forgiveness. I know what you're telling me is the truth. Not true, but truth. He said, I know that. He said, but they don't. And so when I act in a forgiving way, they see it as weakness. And I can't bear that. That's what broke him. He said, I can't hear any more of this. And when he left, I realized in my heart, I've still prayed for this man. I realized that he would go on being this wonderful, forgiving person, and it was killing him because he'd gone too far. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
People aren't reminded they have to evolve to this. They have to get to that place of light that says, this is what the mystics meant when this is so painful. It's so damn painful to recognize how powerful being forgiving is. That it's not saying, oh, this doesn't matter. It's a huge absorption of darkness in this idea that that the way to resolve suffering is to punish someone, and to make them suffer is going to make my suffering go away.
Right.
When you finally get what a foolish mechanism that is, but they don't. But you decide to stop and put the weapon down. And they just think, I won, and you realize, I can't get through to you, but I got through to me.
Yeah, that's right.
Or it got through to me. And that's really hard. That's really hard.
And we find each other, I think, along the way. We're not these lone prophets in the dusk, trying to charge forth and change people's consciousness. We're creating circles of belonging that that have more power than I think any of us have individually.
Absolutely. And we find books like yours. We
Mm.
find it's no, really, I'm not kidding. We find inspirational work like you're writing, books
Like
like,
your writing.
well, like our writings, like this is why we write. This is why we produce this. This is why we teach. But I also think this is why we pray, because I think that there is a grace that comes in that just gives how grace works. It's so incredible. You get that one thought that says, I'm not waiting for someone else to become forgiving. Somehow or other, the grace comes in that says, it's enough for me to be forgiving and it feels okay. And that need to have someone else change is anesthetized in you. That's how grace works. That need to have
Mm.
someone else change is anesthetized, like no, like spiritual novocaine.
Yeah.
And what is enhanced in you is an understanding, like I can wait for someone else to change. I need to work on this. That there's somehow the grace, your heart is enlarged in just the right way.
Right. It's there's Teresa of Avila talks about that combination of effort and grace that we show up to do the work, sometimes hard,
Mhm,
rigorous, demanding spiritual work, and then we allow the grace by its nature either comes or doesn't.
mhm.
But I think what you're saying is that often it does if we are patient and willing.
And
That
consistent,
mm,
consistent in our intention. Yes,
we need
yes.
we need that divine support to do something like forgive, whether
Mm,
it's forgiving Trump or forgiving our neglectful father.
mhm, mhm. Totally, totally. And I don't think people, I think it's important to point out, let me put it this way, that that type of tender grace that that allows a person to say, that's just who he is. But in getting that thought, and at the same time, the wound just feels a little bit less deep. That's that grace experience.
And
That's
you're
that grace experience.
and you're saying we can pray for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a relief.
I think, honestly, Mirabai, I think anytime we pray for healing in the right way, meaning that the way heaven can, like heaven doesn't cover stupid. And heaven doesn't, and heaven won't do our homework. Heaven won't say, look, you don't come home and say, oh, wow, I've overspent and I need a lot of money because I went a little bonkers. Can you do something? I mean, that's not, heaven doesn't do stupid, right? It just doesn't. But if you came back and you said, here's a perfect prayer from one of my best friends who knew she was an addict, a serious alcoholic. And she said that she was coming to a place where she was beginning to accept and acknowledge that she was a serious alcoholic, but she hadn't gotten there yet. And she got on her knees and she said, I don't want to accept that I'm an alcoholic.
Mm.
I need your help.
Mm.
Get me to the place where I acknowledge that I'm an alcoholic and I'll take it from there.
Wow, that's powerful.
And yep, and she said within a week, she drove to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and it began her sobriety. Been sober 45 years.
Mm.
That was her prayer. Get me to the place where I will acknowledge it with sincerity and I'll take it from there.
That's brilliant.
Is that not the perfect prayer?
Mm.
Get me there
Mm.
and then watch me go.
Mm.
To me, and I have used that prayer. Get me to the place where I can see this person with a drop of love and I'll take it from there.
Yeah, that's that co-creative dance with the
Precisely.
divine.
Precisely. I admit I can't do this without you, but if you get me this far, I can run the rest of the race.
Yeah.
And I think that's what ordinary life is. And the ordinary mystical experience is get me this far and I'll take the rest of it.
Which is why all of us qualify as mystics.
Absolutely. Even this page I have, everybody's lady, maybe it happened. Maybe it didn't. But the legend itself changed everything. And the change continues to ripple 5 centuries later. We're told that Mother Mary appeared on a hill in Mexico City and healed the shattered heart of a conquered people. Even the way you describe Our Lady of Guadalupe. Even the way everything you describe is just so exquisite.
Thank you.
So I'm going to end our conversation by telling everybody, honestly, everyone, this book is the kind of book that channels grace into you, that makes you feel like I've got to have an intimate conversation with God. I want an intimacy with the universe. I want to know this way. I want this. I crave, and you don't realize you crave it more than you'll ever know.
It's a beautiful way to end. That's what I want. I want that spark to ignite in people's hearts of not even maybe knowing that that's what you wanted and now tasting it.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank you, my dear. I love you so much. And I'm
Oh,
so
I love you more than my luggage.
That's some beautiful luggage you have. I appreciate that.
I really think, Mirabai, the book is exquisite and people will be blessed and they will benefit from this book and from your work and all your work. But once again, you've given people a gift.
Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate the blessing.
I'm going to rope you into doing a class for me on this. You know that.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay.
I love you, girl.
Love you too. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.